Hi there, my name is Ben Dueck, and I am excited to share with you today what it means to be a people leader in today's world. Really, what we're looking for are leaders who are willing to go through a leadership revolution. Current leadership models are not working, and you have the opportunity, if you're interested, to move into that people leadership role from the technical leader that you are. So my name is Ben Dueck, like I said, and I am passionate about equipping leaders to become world-class influencers in their workplace. Let me share with you a few things around what it means to be a people leader. In order to really understand how to grow into a leadership role, you really need to understand the state of our world as it is today. We're working with a lot of challenges as leaders. The workforce is suffering. You've heard terms like quiet quitting, for example, where people are basically giving up on the work that they're doing. You've also heard about the Great Resignation. As we came out of COVID, there were a lot of challenges around people feeling dissatisfied with their work and wanting more. Not necessarily more money, that was part of it, but more purpose, more connection. They wanted to be recognized for the work that they do. And they did not find that in the workplaces that they were in, so they needed to find other work, the Great Resignation. Now, as leaders, if you're interested in moving into a leadership role, for example, you're going to see challenges around the various generations that we have in the workplace today. This is one of the few times, probably the only time in history, where we will have up to 5 generations in the workplace. Most workplaces only have 4, but even 5. We have to recognize that when we're looking at the workforce and seeing all those different generations working together, we need to figure out how to adapt how we lead to fit such a wide range. We also need to recognize that there's more mental health challenges in our world and in our workplace than there ever has been before. Just if you look at teenagers, for example, 20% of all teens experience depression before they reach adulthood, most never receiving any treatment. And then a lot of those teens are going into college where they do not receive treatment and then off into the workforce. And as leaders, if you're looking to lead, that's going to be a challenge you need to look at as well. And of course, whether you are currently in a leadership role or not, you understand the challenges of being reactive versus proactive, the urgent versus the important. Oftentimes, we feel like we just have so many fires to put out. We're just surrounded by chaos. And it's hard to know what the next step is that we need to take. So can you determine what is most important? Sometimes it is slowing down, being proactive, recognizing that there are important things that we need to do. And it's hard to manage that. Another term you may have heard around that is called the tyranny of the urgent. Patrick Lencioni, if you're familiar with him, he's a great writer on teams and leadership. In his book called The Advantage, he says the single greatest advantage that any company can achieve is its organizational health. And then he goes on to state that very few leaders do anything about it because they feel that there are other priorities. Again, those fires that need to get put out. And of course, as our organizations grow and adapt, we're living in and consumed by a wired and wireless world. The world is smaller than it's ever been before. We can work from home seamlessly when it comes to the work we need to do. We can work with someone from around the world in real time. Now that's tremendous in regards to the amount of work that we can do, but when we're looking at trying to build strong teams and strong leaders, it adds a layer of tension that's never really been experienced in the history before. The world is constantly changing as well, whether it's political events, there's wars, there's trade issues, or whether it's just the way that we as a society are adapting. It adds challenges. I was talking with a leader just this morning who shared his struggle with trying to know how to even communicate effectively because he didn't know what words would get him in trouble and which words wouldn't. So as a leader who has a desire to serve their people well, that adds a layer of challenge as well. Now, of course, I mentioned it earlier, we're also living in this post-COVID recovery. Although some places say COVID's not over yet, of course. But when you think of coming out of that workplace, out of that situation where COVID was impacting things, it adds so many additional pressures. There's a little bit of uncertainty in regards to what's coming. There's a little bit of struggle as to how do we handle this. There's polarization as a result. And polarization, when you think of these things around the world, polarization around it. Now, it's not all bad news as people looking to become leaders or grow their leadership influence. There's this renewed focus on purpose and people that I've been seeing in the workplace. For example, a lot of places are changing the title of their HR people. Instead of calling it the head of HR or HR director, I'm seeing things like director of people and culture, or words and phrases that go with that. Now, of course, that doesn't change much if the policies, the procedures, the way that they act doesn't change, but it speaks to the desire to serve people better. And that's really important in our world and in our leadership efforts. There's also an abundance of available resources for people looking to step up in their leadership. If you just look on Amazon alone, for example, there's over 70,000 results when you type in the word leadership in the book section alone. Now, of course, that provides this franticness of what do I read? What do I consume? And that can be a challenge, but there are a lot of resources available. So it's not all doom and gloom. Now, you might be sitting there and maybe you are a leader already, a people leader. Maybe you're a technical leader and you're looking to step into a role where you have people that report to you. Whichever way it is for you, this is an important challenge. Let me share a few interesting statistics when it comes to this. For example, 35% of employees would rather see their bosses fired instead of getting a raise. So over a third of people in a workplace, because they aren't enjoying or appreciating or working underneath a boss who empowers them, treats them well, who serves them. 75% of employees quit because of their boss, not the company. 86% of organizations recognize that developing new leaders and managers is critical for long-term success. 86%. And yet very few organizations have any way of developing their leaders built into how they run. 16 to 20% of employees around the world are actively disengaged. These are employees that you have on your team, but they're almost like they're sabotaging the work that's trying to be happening. And that's not healthy for the workplace. That's costing, this is a US number, $450 billion. That's a staggering number. And around the world, it's multiples of that as well. So it's costing a lot of money. And I really appreciate recognizing the value of leaders. There's been a lot of studies, and this is one put out by Gallup. Managers and leaders account for 70% of that variance in employee engagement. It is the biggest factor in whether a team is going to be engaged, whether a team is going to be effective. Just imagine how that impacts an organization. So if you're a leader, and if you're working at trying to become more influential, you're looking for a new position, moving from a technical position to a people leader position, you need to develop an interest and a passion in growing your leadership abilities. Otherwise, your impact is going to be stifled and you're not going to know what to do. And that really just relates to what I said earlier, but I want to highlight here again, most companies do not have a measurable way to train and empower their people leaders to be more successful in their roles. Patrick Lencioni also shares this quote: "Not finance, not strategy, not technology. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare." So I want to share with you a little bit of a study that was done by Gallup a number of years ago. And they did this polling around the world to figure out what followers want, what people want from their leaders. Is this formal study, and instead of going to experts and historians and CEOs and celebrities and politicians to define leadership, they wanted real people to give real opinions. They gathered information from more than 10,000 individuals, and they asked them to describe a leader that had the most positive influence on their lives daily, and to list 3 words that best described what that person contributed to their life. Then they studied the 25 most commonly mentioned words, and interestingly enough, words like purpose, wisdom, humor, and humility weren't near the top of the list. What they came up with were 4 main categories. Out of those 25 most common words, they captured them into these 4 categories, and I'll share with you what they are, and they called these followers' basic needs: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. If you're interested in further reading, you can look up Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath. He digs into this a lot further. But what I want to do is share a few thoughts around each of these 4 components and encourage you in your efforts and in your growth to move from a technical leader into a people leader role to embrace these principles. Before I do that, I want to say one more thing. When you move from a technical leadership role into a people leadership role, a lot of the leaders that I work with going through that transition do not understand the shift in mindset that needs to happen. When you're a very technically experienced individual, high-performing individual, and you move into a leadership role, you're no longer focused on your own individual efforts. Your job is now shifted to get the best from the team that is around you. Your mindset needs to shift to serve them, empower them, and help them to succeed. That's why these principles are so important. It provides a foundation to leadership, and leadership is often more of an art than a science. I'll share with you a few practical things you can do at the end of this talk as well, but these principles provide that foundation for your leadership. If you use these 4 principles as you approach your role, you will see greater success. It's not going to be easy. You'll have to figure it out. It takes practice, but you will see greater success. So let me talk about trust first. So when Gallup did this research, they found that trust included some words like honesty, integrity, and respect. And really when it comes to trust, it's how do we achieve follow-through? How do we follow through as leaders? Peter Drucker, great management leadership guru, he says that leadership is an achievement of trust. So what does it mean for you in that way? Some of it is trusting others. Some of it is being someone who follows through and is committed to your integrity of saying, hey, when I do something or when I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. But some of it is related to being authentic and being real and being vulnerable. Again, I'm going to refer to Patrick Lencioni, who talks about trust, being able to know how someone will react in any given situation. But even more importantly, he highlights vulnerability-based trust for leaders to strive toward. Be open, be vulnerable, and build that foundation with your team. We also can be human. We don't need to be these automated leaders. We want to have that human connection, and that does build trust. So a really important principle for you to achieve and answer this question is, how can I be more open and authentic with those around me? If you're not in a leadership role yet, you can begin practicing that. Ask questions about people's lives, about their relationships, about things outside of work. Build real human connection with them, and especially if you are already a leader of people, have those conversations and help people feel like they can trust you. Second principle is compassion. Compassion, other words that Gallup highlighted, are caring, friendship, happiness, and love. Some very high standards to achieve, of course, but these are vitally important for leaders to become better at. Now, it doesn't need to mean becoming a best friend to everyone that you work with, but people want to know that they're more than a number. There's been some other research that Gallup has done, and when people are able to respond to this phrase, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person, in the affirmative, so if they can respond to that phrase in the affirmative, they're going to be more engaged, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be more profitable, and they're going to have higher customer engagement and stay with the company longer. Such an important factor. Now you can do that in many different ways. I encourage people just to pour into the lives of others. Be personal. It relates to the trust factor as well, but it provides you an opportunity as a leader to think of creative ways to care. Not everyone feels compassion or feels cared for in the same way. Think of the people on your team, whether you lead a team or you're just a part of a team. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different. Learn how to approach each person uniquely. Communication is a key part of compassion. I like to use this example where if I am married, and if I was talking to my wife and she said, "You never tell me anything," that would probably be an indication to her that I'm not showing compassion. So we need to communicate and be open with the things that we're talking about. You don't need to share everything, but the clearer we are with our communication, the more people feel connected to the overall purpose. So when you're thinking of how to show compassion, just a question to run through your mind: how can you be creative in showing care and compassion to those around you today? Stability is the third principle. Stability, or as Gallup also identified, security, strength, support, peace. While it's important for companies to be growing and expanding and changing over time, lots of companies do that, there's a need to offer stability and confidence in the direction the company is going. Now, if you're in the world of tech, like most of you are who are listening to this, you know that the world of tech can be very chaotic. So it puts an extra pressure on leaders to try to provide stability in the midst of chaos. One way that we can do this is by a term known as carry your own weather. This basic idea behind this term is that as a leader, you need to develop this ability to have your weather, your emotions and your reactions not spill out into other lives, and vice versa, not let others' emotions spill it out into yours. I don't mean you need to be stoic and never show emotion, but you need to be able to understand the role that your weather plays in your role as a leader. Is your weather predictable or is it not? If you're striving to become a people leader, you're not in that role yet, the way that you carry your weather, the way that you carry your emotions when things go poorly or when they don't go poorly, speaks a lot to your ability to lead and provide that stability. You also want to be transparent. That actually helps with providing stability. Now, you can't tell everything. There's some things that an organization doesn't need to know about. But when employees feel confident in their career, in their career trajectory, in the ability of the company to adapt to changes, they're going to feel more at peace and be more effective. And that relates, of course, to communication as well. So we want to make sure we're communicating effectively about the things that people want to know about. And remember, communication is one of the ways that leaders overestimate how good they are. All studies that I've come across talk about leaders being way less effective at communicating than they think. When they poll the people that they're communicating to, they rate them way lower on communication. So we need to be better at communicating what we need people to do, the direction that the company is going, and that's going to help people feel more secure and safe. So how do you show stability? How can you show stability? How can you communicate more effectively? Finally, I want to talk about hope. Hope. We all like to have hope in times of struggles, but really hope is this powerful piece of being a leader, being an influencer. Gallup's other words in this category include guidance and faith and direction. Remember, followers want to feel that they have faith in their leader. Hope that the leader is taking them in a healthy place. Leaders, the Harvard Business Review says this: leaders need to intentionally pull back, opening your mental aperture to take in the midground and the background. So taking yourself out of the specific focus that you might have in the moment. You need to be able to look at a little bit of a bigger picture, have hope, have a vision. They say it is what we call meta leadership, taking a broad, holistic view of both challenges and opportunities. Properly focused meta leadership fosters well-directed management. The Wikipedia definition for hope is one that I like. Hope is an optimistic state of mind that is based on the expectation of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's life and the world at large. Really, it's how are we being future focused? How are we painting the picture for our teams? Are we sharing an exciting vision of the future? Now, no matter what role you have as a leader, you can do that even on a small scale. Are you able to help people connect the work that they do to the broader picture? Are you able to help them get excited about where that goes? When we're able to do that, it gives people a picture of where we're going. That doesn't mean we ignore hard times. The Stockdale paradox is a concept that was popularized by Jim Collins in Good to Great. And it was about James Stockdale, a former vice presidential candidate. And during the Vietnam War, he was held prisoner of war for over 7 years. He's one of the highest ranking naval officers at the time. And it was a horrific time for him. Being a prisoner of war in any war would be terrible. And they asked him afterwards how he was able to make it through, how he was able to believe that he would make it out alive. And he found this way to do it. And what he said, he explained how he did it. He said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be." The simplest explanation of this paradox is the idea of hoping for the best, but acknowledging and preparing for the worst. As leaders, we need to provide that hope. Let's be real, but let's point towards where we can go. This relates to what I mentioned earlier about being proactive in your leadership. When you're proactive, you're able to get in front of some of the challenges and not just be responding and reacting in the moment, which is very challenging for people to feel inspired by. So if you are leading a team already, try to consider, where is the team going? What are the challenges that are coming in front of you? How can you start talking to your team about them now already? How can you help talk to them about some of their efficiencies or their best practices that they need to implement in a hopeful way. It really comes down to vision. Are you able to have a vision even for your small team? Whether you're leading a whole organization or whether you're leading one department in the organization, have a vision. You'll see your team be inspired as a result. So what is the vision you have for being a leader? Jim Collins, I mentioned him earlier, he's famously known for the book Good to Great. And he was trying to determine what made organizations succeed. What was the biggest factor in organizational success? And he told his team, he was going to send them out to do the research. And he told his team, go out there, figure it out. When you come back, don't come back and tell me it's leadership. That's just cliche. I don't want to hear that. So he sent them out. The team came back. Jim was sitting down with them. And the team said, guess what, Jim? You're not going to like what we have to say. But the biggest factor in success of an organization was leadership. And really, that's where it is, right? It all begins with leadership. Now, you are a unique leader. You have unique leadership potential. Everyone leads differently. I believe that everyone can be a leader. I don't think everyone is a leader, but everyone can be a leader if they implement best practices around leadership, some of these principles that I've talked about, but also if they're able to understand what they bring to the table as a leader. So as you consider your leadership role, understand what you bring to the table is unique. You have your own unique experiences, skills, talents, characteristics. There isn't an exact formula that you need to follow because it's an art. Also consider how these unique attributes that you bring, your strengths and talents and experiences, contribute to those 4 areas of trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Which of those areas are going to be the most effective for you? Which ones are going to be the least effective for you? Which principles are going to be the hardest because of how you understand your personality, you understand what you need to do. And then implement your own customized approach, of course. Now, I recommend a very special tool that I've used in a lot of different workshops is the Clifton Strengths Assessment. If you're curious about it, I encourage you to look it up. It's used in 90% of the Fortune 500 companies, and it's a tool that helps identify leaders' natural strengths and abilities, and also team members' natural strengths and abilities. It's a great tool for self-awareness, helping you understand that your greatest opportunity for success is leading through what comes naturally to you, refining that and using that, not focusing on your weaknesses. We don't ignore weaknesses, but how can you lead through your strengths? Now, I did promise I'd leave you with some practical steps that you can take, so I want to give you a few thoughts around all of this. Now, you might be sitting there, you might be a little bit like, well, Ben, you've talked about all these things, you've really set the stage well for the pressure on leaders and the impact that leaders have. What do I do? Well, I think first and foremost, take a breath. Right? Going in towards anything with franticness and panic doesn't work. Recognize that you got to slow things down a little bit and grow in your intentionality. And I think that's a key thing that I encourage leaders of all kind of stages in their leadership growth is to embrace the learning and growth that is needed to lead well. There is no leader who has made it in regards to leadership. Every leader I talk to has a step that they can take. So what's your step? I also encourage leaders to ask their organization how they support leadership development and find out leadership expectations. A lot of times leaders are left high and dry. So even before you're in a leadership role, and let's say you're looking at stepping into that role, ask your organization, how will my leadership growth be supported? I want to be a more effective leader. You'll be surprised, a lot of organizations, even if they don't have anything set up, they're very open to supporting that journey. I always encourage people to take small steps as well. So encourage you as you are on your leadership journey, don't try to do a million things at once. Implement one change to grow your leadership impact. Just one change. Work on that for a period of time. Become better at that. So if it's trying to become more connected to your team, work on that. How do you do that? Maybe it's in your one-on-ones. Maybe it's having some time at the beginning of each one-on-one, or even at the beginning of each group set time together, where you talk a little bit about some personal stuff, how their weekend was, what their plans are for that evening, different things like that, how their dogs, their cats, their pets, their kids, how they're doing. That could be one thing that you choose to work on. And I used the word intentional earlier. I really encourage people especially if you're already in a leadership role, to schedule in your calendar, block off time for intentional leadership. What I mean by that is times that you set aside to put yourself in that mindset very intentionally of what does it mean to get the best from my people? How can I do that? As you do that, you're able to process some of the principles that we've talked about and grow in that way. If you're looking for some recommended resource, I really like The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, Strength-Based Leadership by Tom Rath. Crucial Conversations is a great book around conflict and how to manage some of those hard conversations that we have. And also the Clifton Strengths Assessments and Reports. So I really want to thank you for listening to this talk around leadership. Depending on where you're at in your leadership journey, you may be ready to dig deeper, you may not be, but I encourage you, whatever stage you're at, to take one step today. One step towards moving from this individual contributor into this role as a people leader, or perhaps you're already a people leader. What is one step that you can take to grow as a leader? If you have any questions about anything I've talked about, feel free to reach out. I'll gladly help you out with that. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of the conference. We'll talk soon.